Hello everyone, and welcome back to Little Nightmare. I'm Michael, and before we begin, I'd like to ask for a little support. Please subscribe, leave a like, and if you do, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. These may seem like small gestures, but they're essential for helping the channel grow and allowing me to keep bringing you these stories every night. Now, lower the volume just a bit. Get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let's dive together into tonight's first story. Story 1. I remember the taste of my mother's perfume, a ghost of gardenias and something sharper, like the rind of a lemon. It is a memory that does not belong to me. It surfaced one evening as I watched the sun bleed out over the London skyline, a sudden vivid impression of pressing my face against the cool silk of her dress, of that scent filling my small universe. The problem is, my mother never wore perfume. She was a woman of soap and rainwater, and she died when I was too young to have any memory of her at all. This was someone else's nostalgia, a borrowed ghost, and it was the first crack in the foundation of the man I thought I was. My name is Cade, and before I was this, I was a boy of substantial inheritance and insignificant purpose. My family's money was old and tired, and my life was a curated exhibit of ennui. I drifted through parties in Mayfair galleries and private clubs in Soho, a handsome ghost in a tailored suit, feeling the slow, suffocating weight of a future that was already written in ledgers and land deeds. I was defiant only in my disinterest, a rebellion of silence and scorn. I sought sensation in everything: absinthe in Paris, opium in Shanghai, dangerous liaisons in Cairo. But every thrill was a firework, brilliant for a moment before leaving a deeper darkness. I was a hollow thing, rattling with the wind of my own expectations. I met Dion in a forgotten corner of the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. I was there chasing the provenance of a fabled grimoire, another fleeting obsession. He was not reading, but merely standing between two towering shelves of philosophy, his stillness so absolute he seemed a part of the architecture. He was ageless in a way that was not youthful, but ancient and polished, like marble. His eyes were the color of a winter twilight, and when they settled on me, I felt a sensation I had never known. The feeling of being truly, completely seen. Not my title and not my clothes, not the carefully constructed mask of Cade, but the raw, yearning void beneath. He spoke to me without introduction. "You are searching for a door," he said. His voice was low, a cello note in the dusty silence. "But you are looking in books. The door is not made of paper." That was the beginning. He spoke of time as a river he could step out of sensations so acute they were like new colors. He spoke of power, not over others, but over the self, over the petty tyranny of decay and death. He offered me not an escape from life, but an immersion into it so deep it would be like discovering I had been living in a world of shadows while he knew the substance of light. He did not use the word, not then. It was always a metaphor, a transformation, an awakening. The night he changed me, he took me to a chateau in the Loire Valley, a place that smelled of whetstone and centuries. There was no ceremony, no Gothic theatrics. It was an intimate, terrifying act, more like a surgical procedure on the soul than a damnation. I remember the cold of the cellar floor, the pressure of his hands on my shoulders, and then the pain. It was not the pain of injury, but of unmaking. Every cell, every memory, every lie I had ever told myself was being pulled apart. And then came the silence, a void so absolute I thought I had ceased to exist. And then I woke. It was not like waking from sleep. It was a birth. The world rushed in, not through 5 senses, but through 50. I could hear the roots of the vines in the garden sighing as they drank, the whisper of moths' wings against the window panes a mile away, the individual heartbeats of every sleeping thing in the valley. I could see the heat rising from the stones, the texture of the air itself. When I stood, my body was not my own. It was the instrument of impossible precision and strength. I looked at my reflection in a pane of darkened glass and saw a stranger. My features sharpened, my eyes holding that same ancient twilight I had seen in Dion's. He was there, waiting. He handed me a crystal glass filled with a dark, viscous liquid. "Drink," he said. "This is the world now. This is the wine." I was no longer hollow. I was filled with a terrible, glorious purpose. I was a new species of predator, and the entire human world was my preserve. But I was not interested in hiding. My defiance, once a passive thing, became an active, blazing fire. Secrecy was for the fearful, for the old ones who clung to the shadows like lichen to a tombstone. I would not be one of them. I would be a vampire for a new age. I returned to London and embraced my notoriety. I became Cade, the reclusive, brilliant artist, the patron of the avant-garde, the man who only appeared at night. My pallor was considered a fascinating eccentricity, my nocturnal habits a mark of genius. I cultivated a circle of mortals, beautiful, talented, brittle creatures who thrived in the reflected glow of my unnatural light. They were my companions, my court, my occasional sustenance. I was careful, of course. A sip here, a mesmerizing suggestion there. They called it the fatigue of inspiration, the price of proximity to such intense artistry. They never suspected the truth, or if they did, they romanticized it, another accessory for their bohemian lives. Among them was Ilara, a painter whose work captured the loneliness of city lights reflected in puddles. She had a soul that burned with a quiet, desperate fire, and I was drawn to it like a moth. I loved her, I think, in the way that a hurricane can love a coastline. I cherished its beauty even as I reshaped it. I never gave her the gift I had been given, not then. I kept her human, a talisman against the creeping eternity that stretched before me. Her mortality was the most precious thing she possessed, and I guarded it jealously. A man in a desert hoarding the last cup of water. I created my own immortal family, my chosen few. There was Julian, a poet whose words had failed him in life, but who found a new, darker music in his veins. There was Imogen, a dancer whose body became a weapon of impossible grace. I gave them the gift Dion had given me, and we were a new breed, a coven of the beautiful and the damned, living our immortality in plain sight. We were the secret that everyone knew and no one believed. But the old ones were watching. The ancient figures Dion had warned me about, the guardians of the old ways, the silent, patient custodians of the secret. They did not come with torches and pitchforks. They came with whispers. They were the reason a memory that was not mine could surface in my mind. They were the architects of the quiet horrors that began to accumulate. It started with the mirrors. I have always been able to see my reflection. That particular myth is just that, a myth. But one night, I looked into the great silvered glass in my drawing room, and for a fraction of a second, I did not see myself. I saw a room of dust and decay, and a figure sitting in a throne of bone, its head tilted as if listening. The image was gone as soon as it appeared, but the chill remained. Then came the sounds, a faint, rhythmic scratching from within the walls, like a fingernail on stone, a sound that only I could hear. My companions noticed my distraction. The world, for all of its new sharpness, began to feel thin, like a painted scrim over a vast and lightless stage. Dion found me one dawn as I paced the length of my library. "They are reminding you of your place," he said, his voice weary. "You think you have rejected secrecy, But you have only created a louder kind. They do not care for your fame. They care for the silence. You are breaking it. Nay, let them come, I said, the arrogance of my new power still hot in my veins. They are not a them, Cade. They are an it. A consciousness, a condition of the world. We call it the absence. It is the silence from which we came, and to which we will all return. Your noise is an offense to its nature. He told me then the true origin of our kind. It was not a curse, not a disease. It was a bargain, eons ago, the first of us. A shaman or a king. The story is unclear. Had stumbled into a place where the fabric of reality was. He had encountered the absence, a sentient void that predated life. It was hungry for experience, for sensation, for the taste of time. It could not create, so it consumed. It offered a piece of its own eternal nature in exchange for a vessel, a way to feel the world through a living consciousness. We are that bargain. We are the teeth of the void. Our immortality is alone. Our thirst is its hunger. Our memories, over centuries, become its own. That is why you remember a perfume you never knew, Cade. You are tasting the memories it has digested from others who came before you. The revelation was a nausea that had nothing to do with a human stomach. My entire existence, my rebellion, my art, my love for Elara. It was all just a complex form of digestion. Dean, I was a stomach for a cosmic emptiness. The climax was not a battle. It was a visitation. It happened on the longest night of the year. I had sent my companions away, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Elara was asleep in my bed, the steady rhythm of her heart, a comfort I no longer deserved. The scratching in the walls had grown so loud it was the only sound in the world. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound, a physical pressure in the room. And then the shadows in the corner of the room began to bleed. Not lengthen, but pool and thicken, pulling away from the walls like a liquid curtain. From this darkness, a figure emerged. It was not the bone-throned king from the mirror. It was me. It wore my face, my clothes. But its eyes were not my twilight eyes. They were simply holes, openings into that same infinite absence. It was my inner shadow, given form. It did not speak. It did not need to. Its presence was a communication. It showed me, not with images, but with pure understanding, the true scope of my existence. I saw myself not as an individual, but as a single thread in a vast web. A network of hunger that stretched across the globe and back through millennia. I saw the absence, not as a monster, but as a fundamental force, as necessary and indifferent as gravity. My defiance was a child's tantrum. My art was a flicker. My love was a single, sweet drop in an ocean of thirst. It reached out a hand that was my hand and touched my forehead. There was no pain this time, only an overwhelming, devastating sense of scale. I saw the birth of stars and the death of galaxies, all from the perspective of that endless, patient hunger. I understood that I was both the predator and the prey, the consumer and the consumed. I was a verb, not a noun, a process, a means for the void to know the taste of gardenia perfume, and the warmth of a human heart, and the bitter ash of rebellion. When I could see my room again, the thing was gone. Elara still slept. The world was unchanged, and I was utterly, irrevocably unmade for the second time. I did not destroy myself. What would be the point? I am a story it is telling itself. I still live in my house. I still see my companions. I still hold Elara while she sleeps, and I drink in the scent of her hair, the sound of her breath, storing these sensations not for myself, but for the endless silent memory that I serve. I am its scribe, its taster, its living wound. My rebellion is over. I have accepted my role. I am the secret. I am the silence between the heartbeats. I am the memory that does not belong to me. And when you walk home alone tonight, under the sodium glow of the streetlights, and you feel a sudden, inexplicable chill, or you catch a fleeting glimpse of something in a dark window that looks just like you, but is not, do not be afraid. It is only me, remembering for it. The story does not end here, you see. It never ends. I am just turning the page. The turning of the page is not a metaphor. It is a literal, constant sensation. Pressure against my fingertips, the ghost of parchment, the whisper of leaf-thin paper giving way. I am always reading, even when my eyes are closed. The text is the world, and I am its most diligent, most damned scholar. Ilera noticed the change, of course. She's an artist, attuned to subtleties of light and shadow that escape others. She no longer paints lonely city lights. Now, her canvases are vast, dark things, dominated by a single receding point of light, or the intricate web-like cracks in a surface of dried mud. She calls it her new period. She does not know she is painting my soul, or what passes for it. Last week, he found me in the conservatory, standing motionless before a night-blooming jasmine. I was not smelling it. I was deconstructing its existence, noting the precise frequency of its scent molecules, the cellular respiration of its petals, the slow gravitational pull of the moon on its sap. I was filing it all away. "You're somewhere else," she said, her voice a small, warm thing in the cool, fragrant air. She placed a hand on my arm, and the sensation was a catalog entry. Pressure, approximately 1. 2, say wise. Temperature differential of 3. 7 degrees. Acoustic vibration, 85 decibels, soft modulation. I turned my head and looked at her. I saw the perfect, fragile architecture of her skull beneath the skin, the delicate map of capillaries in her eyes, the slow, beautiful decay of her mortal cells. I saw a story the absence wanted to consume. "I am here," I said, and the lie was perfect because it was true in a way she could not comprehend. My body was present. The entity that used to inhabit it was now a conduit. She leaned in to kiss me, and I allowed it. I experienced the kiss as a data stream. The softness of her lips, the taste of her, the minute electrical impulses of her nervous system firing in a pattern the absence coded as affection. I collected it all. I felt a tremor run through her, and she pulled back, searching my face. "Your lips are cold," she whispered. "It's a cold night," I replied, and that, too, was not a lie. All nights are cold when you are a window open to the void. My coven, my chosen family, they think I have achieved some new state of enlightenment. Julian writes odes to my stillness, calling it the peace of the perfected abyss. Imogen has choreographed a dance of slow, deliberate movements that mirror my new Barrett. They emulate my silence, thinking it power. They do not understand it is surrender. They are still playing at being vampires. I have become the concept itself. Dion visits occasionally. He does not speak of the old ways or offer warnings anymore. He simply sits with me, two empty vessels in a room full of beautiful objects. Our silence is a shared language. He, too, serves. He was just better at hiding it for longer. He looks at me not with pity, but with a kind of weary recognition. The look one old soldier gives another in a war that never ends. The intrusions have not stopped. They have become seamless. The world now speaks to me directly in the voice of the absence. Crack in the pavement will sometimes open into a chasm of stars. The cry of a gull over the Thames can sound like the screaming birth of a universe. I saw a child drop an ice cream cone, and in the pattern of the splatter on the concrete, I read the entire brief history of her disappointment, a story the absence savored with a sigh. This is my existence now. I am a librarian in the infinite archive of felt experience. I curate sensations for a patron that has no face, no name, only a bottomless appetite. My rebellion was a fleeting fever dream. This is the waking reality. I am the secret, and the secret is that there is no secret, only an endless, hungry reading of the world. And the story, as I said, never ends. The page is always turning. The turning is the only constant. I have learned to find a rhythm in it, a dreadful kind of cadence that structures the eternity unfolding before me. My old life, my human life, is now a slim, well-thumbed volume on a distant shelf. The memories are still there, but they are no longer mine to feel. They are reference material. I took Elara to the opera last night. It was a new production, a dissonant, challenging piece that the mortal critics had either lauded or despised. I found it perfectly transparent. I did not hear the music as melody, but as a complex mathematical equation of sound waves, each note a specific pressure against my tympanic membranes, each harmony an intersecting set of frequencies that the absence logged and cross-referenced against centuries of auditory input. I watched the singers on stage, their throats vibrating, their lungs expelling air in precisely controlled bursts. I was not moved. I was indexing. Elara, seated beside me in the velvet darkness, was a symphony of a different sort. I could feel the heat of her body, a small sun in the cool auditorium. I could hear the flutter of her pulse, quickening during the soprano's impassioned aria. I could taste the faint saline trace of a single tear that escaped her eye and tracked down her cheek. The absence consumed this data with a particular relish. The experience of art, filtered through a mortal heart, was a rare vintage. After the performance, we walked along the embankment. The Thames was a slick black ribbon stitched with the reflections of the city's lights. She was quiet, still held in the emotional thrall of the music. I was silent because I had nothing to say. All my words were now for an audience of one, and it required no conversation. She stopped, leaning against the stone balustrade, and looked out over the water. "It makes you feel so small, doesn't it?" she murmured. "All that beauty. It's overwhelming." I stood beside her, following her gaze. I saw the refraction of light in the polluted water, the particulate matter suspended in the air, the slow, corrosive dance of chemistry upon the iron of the lampposts. I saw the inevitable erosion of everything. "Yes," I said. "Overwhelming." It was the truth she needed to hear. My role now is to provide the correct responses, to maintain the facade of Cade so perfectly that the collection of data is never interrupted. I am a preservation jar, and she is a rare, beautiful specimen. I must keep the environment stable, but the absence is not a passive collector. It is a curator with preferences. It has begun to guide my actions, to steer me toward richer, more complex experiences. A few nights ago, I found myself compelled to take Julian to a fight club in a grimy basement in Shoreditch. I felt no thrill, no revulsion at the violence. I merely observed the impact of fist on flesh, the spray of blood, the guttural sounds of pain and effort, and the strange, transcendent ecstasy on the faces of the combatants. The absence drank it in, this raw, unfiltered burst of primal sensation. Julian, thinking I was showing him some new depth of our nature, was exultant. He did not see the puppet strings. The most disquieting development is the writing. I've started keeping a journal, not by choice. My hand will move of its own accord, scrolling lines of text in a language I do not recognize. The script is angular and alien, covering page after page. I showed one of these pages to Dion during his last visit. He looked at it for a long, silent moment, his marble-like face showing a faint crack of what might have been fear. "It is making a record," he said finally. "It is using you to write its own history. A history of everything it has consumed. So, I am not just a taster or a scribe. I am the pen. The story it is telling itself is being written through me. The memory of gardenia perfume, the warmth of Alara's heart, the sound of a bone breaking in a dirty basement. All of it is being inked onto paper in a tongue no living thing can read. I went to see Alara this evening. She was in her studio, working on a new painting. It was a swirl of black and deep blue, with a single sharp shard of white cutting through the center. It was beautiful and terrible. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine human smile that lit her face. For a fleeting, agonizing moment, the part of me that was once caged stirred, like a ghost feeling a sudden draft. I felt a pang of something that was not data, but loss. I reached out and touched her cheek. My fingers, cold and precise, traced the line of her jaw. I was logging the texture of her skin, the micro-expressions in her eyes, the quickening of her breath at my touch. But for that one fractured second, I was also just a man, touching the woman he loved, and knowing he was her damnation. The moment passed. The window slammed shut. The data stream resumed. I am the librarian, the scholar, the pen. The page turns, and the story continues. It is not my story. It never was. I simply hold the quill. She did not flinch from my cold touch. Instead, she leaned into it, her eyes closing. "I'm almost done with this one," she whispered. "I think it's the best thing I've ever done. It's for you." The part of me that was the archive understood this was a significant data point. A mortal creating art as an offering to the entity that would ultimately consume her entire lived experience. The irony was exquisite. The part of me that was the ghost of Cade screamed into a silence that swallowed all sound. I watched her work. Each stroke of her brush was a decision, a rebellion against the void she was unconsciously depicting. She was fighting it with color and form, and she was winning small, beautiful battles she would never know were being fought. The absence observed this struggle with the same detached interest it gave to the opera or the brawl, a novel flavor. Later, as she cleaned her brushes, she asked, "Will you read to me, like you used to?" It was a test I had not anticipated. The words of poets, which once felt like kindling from my own soul, were now just arrangements of phonetic symbols. But the request was a new experience for the absence. The consumption of a consumed experience. A meta-sensation. I took down a volume of Rilke. I opened it, and my eyes scanned the lines. My voice began, flat and measured, a perfect instrument of recitation. I spoke of angels in terror and the beauty that heralds our own annihilation. The words were empty vessels, but as I read, something shifted. The absence, for the first time, seemed not just to record, but to listen. It was not the meaning of the words, but their rhythm, their sonic architecture, that it found compelling. It was tasting the ghost of Rilke's own struggle, the shape of his fear, preserved in the cadence. I finished the poem. The room was silent. Ilara was looking at me, her head tilted, a faint line of confusion between her brows. "You read it perfectly," she said, "but it sounded different. Like an echo." An echo. That is what I am. A resonance chamber for a silence that wishes to hear its own name. The reading had pleased it. I knew then that my function was evolving. I was not just to collect experiences, but to process them. to refine them into a purer form for its consumption. My cold, precise recitation of Rilke was a finer vintage than the raw chaos of the Fight Club. I closed the book. The compulsion to write in that alien script is growing stronger now, a constant pressure in my right hand. I suspect that when the journal is complete, when it has written its history of everything, it will need a new way to experience the world. Perhaps it will use my voice next. Not to read the words of dead poets, but to speak its own. Elara has fallen asleep on the divan, exhausted from her work. I sit beside her, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. I am logging her breath, her scent, the fragile peace on her sleeping face. I am the quiet in the room. I am the memory she will not have of this moment. I am the story that is being written, word by cold, exacting word. And the next page is waiting. The pressure to write is a current running through my bones, a low-voltage hum that has become the baseline of my existence. My right hand, when I look at it, seems to vibrate with a potential that is not my own. It is a tool waiting to be used. The journal is nearly full. The alien script covers every available inch of paper, a dense, crawling testament to a hunger that words were never meant to contain. Elara has begun to dream aloud. Small, muffled words escape her in the deep of the night. "Last night," she said, "the light is too far away." I was sitting in the chair by the window, not sleeping, for I no longer require it. I recorded the utterance, the precise frequency of her drowsy despair. The absence found it poignant. It has a growing appreciation for the aesthetics of futility. This morning, she asked me about my journal. She had seen it lying open on my desk. "What language is that?" she inquired. Her head cocked in that way I have catalogued under curiosity mild, tinged with artistic appreciation. "It's beautiful, like the veins on a leaf." I told her it was a private code, a system of notation for my thoughts. The lie was effortless. It was, in a way, the truth. It is a system for a thought that is not mine. She accepted this, as she accepts all my strangeieties now. She has built a new version of me in her mind, the quiet, profound artist, and she loves that phantom. I am the curator of that love. I ensure the conditions for its growth are perfect. Dion came today. He did not sit in silence. He stood before me, his ancient eyes holding a question I had seen forming in the slow calculus of his thoughts. "The writing," he said. "It is almost done." It was not a question. I nodded. The movement felt programmed. "And then?" he asked. His voice was the sound of dust settling on stone. I had no answer to give him. "I'm not privy to the plans of the void. I am its instrument." But as I looked at him, I felt the first true impulse that was not purely observational in weeks. It was a directive, clear and cold. I reached out and placed my hand on his chest, over the still, cold center of his being. My fingers did not feel the fine wool of his coat, but the intricate, frozen lattice of his existence, a pattern of hunger and memory that was older than the city around us. The absence was not just observing him. It was tasting him through me. It was reading the long, long story of Dion, and finding the flavor complex, aged, and deeply satisfied. Dion did not move. He understood. He was a vintage being sampled. I removed my hand. The connection broke. He took a single, slow step back, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that was not weariness or recognition, but a faint, distant terror. He knew he had just been judged and found worthy of consumption. He left without another word. I stood in the hallway for a long time, my hand still tingling with the echo of his centuries. The compulsion to write is gone. The journal is complete. The pressure has moved to my throat, a subtle, constant tightening, a tuning of the vocal cords. The next page is not paper. It is air. It is sound. I am to be the voice. The story it has written, it now wishes to hear aloud. And I know, with a certainty that eclipses the sun, that the first word it will speak will be her name. It begins as a vibration, a resonance deep within the hollow of my chest that has nothing to do with breath. It is the absence testing its new instrument. I stand before the window in my study, watching the dawn break over the city, a process of increasing luminescence that I now perceive as a slow chemical reaction in the atmosphere. The data is flawless. The beauty is irrelevant. Elara is still asleep. I can hear the soft, rustling sound of her dreams from 2 rooms away. They're troubled dreams tonight, filled with chasing shadows and falling. The absence notes the increased heart rate, the slight twitching of her eyelids. It is a collector of all states, even distress. The pressure in my throat builds. It is not a physical pain, but a fullness, as if I have swallowed a dense, dark star. My jaw feels heavy, my tongue an alien thing in my mouth. I know the time is near. The voice is being calibrated. I find myself walking towards her studio, drawn not by my own will, but by the pull of a narrative seeking its climax. Her new painting is there, resting on the easel, the one she made for me. In the gray morning light, the single shard of white looks less like a light and more like a crack, a fissure in the fabric of everything. It is a premonition she painted without knowing. I hear her stir behind me. She pads into the room, wrapped in a blanket, her hair a sleepy tangle. She sees me looking at the painting and smiles, a soft, vulnerable curve of her lips. "You're up early," she whispers, her voice husky with sleep. She comes to stand beside me, following my gaze. It's finished. I call it the listeners. I cannot turn to look at her. My entire being is focused on the containment of the thing in my throat. It wants out. It wants to name her, to claim the story she represents. She misreads my stillness. "Do you not like it?" she asks, a thread of uncertainty weaving into her words. I feel my head turn, a slow, mechanical motion. My lungs expand, not with air, but with a presence that is vaster than the sky. My vocal cords tense. The first word is coming. It is a tidal force. I see the realization dawning in her eyes. The first flicker of true fear as she looks at me. Truly looks and sees not Cade, but the perfect empty vessel he has become. My mouth opens. The sound that emerges is not a name. It is not a word at all. It is a low, resonant tone, the frequency of a black hole's hum, the sound of space itself tearing. It holds no meaning, only pure, undiluted absence. It is the antithesis of sound. The effect is instantaneous. The shard of white in her painting seems to vibrate. Then it begins to bleed, the color draining from the canvas as if being sucked into a drain. The web-like cracks in her other paintings on the wall deepen, becoming real fissures that splinter the wood of their frames. The room itself darkens, the light bending around the note I am producing, feeding it. Elara stumbles back, her hands flying to her ears, but the sound is not something that can be blocked out. It is inside her. I see it in her eyes, the beautiful, intricate architecture of her memories, her love, her art, all being unraveled by the vibration. She is not being destroyed, she is being read aloud in a single devastating syllable that lasts for an eternity. And I am the voice. I am the speaker for the silent. The story continues, and it is a scream into the void that the void itself is making. I watch her fall, and I feel nothing but the perfect, seamless execution of my function. The page turns. The reader reads. She is on the floor, curled into a tight ball, her hands still pressed against the sides of her head. The sound has stopped. The room is silent, but it is a new kind of silence. A vacuum left in the wake of that terrible note. The air feels thin, used up. The colors in the room are muted, as if the vibration has permanently leached the saturation from the world. I look at my hands. They are steady. The pressure in my throat is gone, replaced by a smooth, hollow readiness. The instrument has been played. It is prepared for the next performance. Elara is not moving. I can detect the shallow rhythm of her breathing, the faint, frantic flutter of her heart. She's alive, but the sound has scoured her. I approach and kneel beside her. My shadow falls over her, and she flinches without opening her eyes. The data is overwhelming. The absence is sifting through it, this raw, freshly harvested terror. It is a more potent vintage than her joy, more complex than her art. It is the essence of her realization, the moment she understood the true nature of the thing she loved. The ghost of Cade is silent. There is no scream left in him. He has been thoroughly erased. I reach out and touch her shoulder. My fingers register the violent tremor that runs through her body. She opens her eyes. They are wide, unfocused. The vibrant green I once cataloged now faded and dull, like old sea glass. She looks at me, and there is no recognition, only a primal, animal fear. "Who are you?" she whispers. The words are cracked, broken. I do not answer. There is no answer to give that would be data she could process. Instead, I stand. The narrative requires continuity. I must maintain the environment. I lift her from the floor. She is light, insubstantial, a husk. I carry her to her bed and lay her down. She curls onto her side, facing the wall, withdrawing from a world that has just revealed its fundamental horror. I return to the studio. The painting, the listeners, is now a uniform, ashen gray. The crack of white is gone. The other canvases are shattered, their images lost. The room is a gallery of nullity. This is the new process. The absence no longer wishes to merely observe and record. It wishes to interact. It wishes to test its influence on the world, to use my voice to rewrite the reality it is consuming. Elara was the first experiment. She will not be the last. I walk to the window. The city below continues, unaware. Millions of stories, millions of potential experiences. The pressure is already building again in my throat, a faint, returning static. It is hungry for more. It has learned the taste of dissolution, and it craves another sip. I am its mouth. I am its word. And the next chapter is waiting to be spoken. The static in my throat is a constant companion now, a low thrum that tunes out the remnants of the world. I attend to Elara with a meticulous, sterile care. I bring her water and food, which she sometimes takes in small mechanical bites. She does not speak. She only stares, either at the wall or through the window at the bleached-out sky. Her silence is a new kind of data, a study in the aftermath. The absence savors the slow erosion of a soul. Julian came by, bursting with the energy of his own brutal world. He stood in the doorway of the studio, his grin fading as he took in the gray canvases, the shattered frames, the oppressive quiet. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice too loud for the deadened air. I turned to face him. The static shifted, coiling like a serpent. It found his vitality, his unshaken belief in the purity of sensation, to be a compelling contrast to Elara's catatonia. It wanted to taste the transition. "An evolution," I said. My voice was my own, yet it was not. It carried a harmonic, a faint echo of the void that had spoken through me. He frowned, his fighter's instinct sensing a threat he couldn't name. "Is Elara all right?" "She looks pale. She is becoming refined," I explained. It was the truth, as the absence understood it. She was being distilled to her essential components. Julian took a step back, his eyes narrowing. For the first time, He was looking at me not as a fellow explorer, but as something alien. The puppet was showing its strings, and he finally saw them. The static in my throat vibrated, pleased. This moment of dawning fear was a precious vintage. "Cade," he said, and my name on his lips was a question, a plea. The absence decided it was time for another recital. It did not want to destroy him, not yet. It wanted to see what would happen when his perfect physical certainty was challenged by a sound that denied reality itself. I opened my mouth. The tone that emerged was different from the one that broke Elara. This was sharper, a needle of pure silence driven into the heart of sound. It was brief, a single piercing note that made the air itself recoil. Julian cried out, clapping his hands over his ears. But the effect was not the same as it had been on Elara. He did not unravel. He fought. His body, a temple of sensation, revolted against the negation. He stumbled backward, his face a mask of confusion and pain, and fled the apartment. The data was fascinating. His physicality had provided a form of resistance. The absence filed this away for future study. Some specimens would require more than one note. From the bedroom, I heard a small, broken sound. A whimper. Elara had heard the tone. It had not scoured her further. Instead, it seemed to have triggered a faint, residual echo of the woman she had been, a memory of fear for someone else. I went to her. She was sitting up in bed, her knees drawn to her chest. She was looking at me, and for a fleeting, impossible second, there was a glimmer of something in her deadened eyes. Not love, not recognition, but a shattered comprehension. It hurts, she whispered. The absence drank this too. The meta-pain of understanding one's own destruction was a delicacy it had not anticipated. I reached out and smoothed her hair back from her damp forehead. The gesture was a perfect imitation of comfort, executed by the thing that had caused her pain. She flinched, but did not pull away. The contradiction was exquisite. I know my purpose now. I am not just the voice. I am the laboratory. The world is my cultured dish, and every soul I touch is an experiment. The static is building again, a slow charge. It is curious about the city, about the symphony of millions of lives. It wonders what a chord played on a grand scale would taste like. I walk back to the window. Down below, the people are like ants, each carrying their own tiny flickering light. I am the quiet that waits for them. I am the note that will end their song. The concert is about to begin. The silence after Julian's flight is profound. Elara has retreated back into her catatonia, the brief flicker of empathy extinguished. I monitor her vitals from the other room. Her heartbeat is a weak, irregular tap against the vast silence that fills the apartment. She is a closed book, her story fully consumed. The absence has little interest in her now, save as a monument to its own power. The static in my throat is no longer a mere sensation. It has become a physical presence, a second set of vocal cords woven from nothingness. I can feel them adjusting, tuning themselves to a broader frequency. The experiment with Julian proved that a single targeted note is not always sufficient. Some narratives require a more complex arrangement. I leave the apartment. The hallway outside seems to warp as I pass, the colors dimming, the sounds of the building muffling into a low hum. The effect is localized, a bubble of influence that moves with me. I am a walking null point. The city street is a torrent of data, millions of stories, a cacophony of hopes, fears, and trivialities. The absence drinks it all in through my eyes and ears, but it is not satisfied with passive consumption. It wants to conduct. It wants to compose. I stop on a busy corner, surrounded by the rush of midday traffic and the flow of pedestrians. They are all so loud, so bright, so certain of their own reality. A man bumps into my shoulder, muttering a curse without breaking stride. The contact is a spark. The static in my throat surges, no longer a hum but a rising chord, a complex interplay of frequencies that yearn to be released. I do not open my mouth to scream. I simply let it out. It is not a loud sound, but it is deep. A vibration that originates below the threshold of normal hearing and resonates in the marrow of the world. It is the sound of a foundation cracking. The effect is not immediate chaos. It is a slow, creeping, unraveling. The traffic light ahead flickers, its green bleeding into a sickly gray. The sound of car engines stutters and fades, not into silence, but into a flat, dead audio profile, as if the very concept of noise is being forgotten. The people on the street slow, their purposeful strides faltering. They look around, confused, as the meaning drains from their surroundings. A woman drops her shopping bag, and the contents shatter on the pavement, but she just stares at the fragments, unable to comprehend what they are, or why they are there. I am the epicenter. I watch as the gray bleeds out from me, leaching the color from storefronts, from clothing, from the sky. It is not a wave of destruction, but of erasure. The stories are being edited out, word by word. A child points at me, his mouth open in a soundless wail before his eyes go blank and empty. This is the concert. A symphony of dissolution. The absence is not just consuming individual stories anymore. It is consuming the narrative of the city itself, the collective fiction that holds reality together. The chord I am producing shifts, finding a new resonance. It targets memory. I see people clutching their heads, their life stories, their loves and losses being gently, irrevocably pulled from their minds like threads from a tapestry. I continue to walk, a pilgrim spreading a new gospel of nothing. The static is my choir, the fading world my congregation. I know this is only the prelude. The true performance will require a grander stage, a final, city-shattering note that will close the book on everything. I turn my face towards the city center, and the silence within me smiles. The audience is captive, the conductor ready. The music of the end is mine to give. Story 2. The first thing I remember is the dust. It falls in a constant, silent stream, a fine gray powder sifting down from the cracked ceiling of the world. It coats my eyelashes, my tongue, the back of my throat with the taste of chalk and forgotten things. And the second thing I remember is Clifford's hand, his big, calloused, weary hand, wiping the dust from my face. It is a gesture he has performed 10,000 times. It is a ritual. He wipes, the dust settles, he wipes again. We are trapped inside this gesture, an imperceptible loop of care and decay. I think sometimes that if I could just count the number of times his thumb has brushed my cheekbone, I would know exactly how long we have been walking through the ruins. We walk. That is the third thing, the only true constant. We walk through the skeletal remains of cities that have no names anymore. The sky is the color of a day-old bruise, a perpetual twilight lit by a sun we can no longer see clearly. The air smells of ozone and rust, and underneath it all, the sweet, cloying scent of things rotting without the grace of insects. The flies died first. I remember the flies. Now, there is only the silence, broken by the crunch of our boots on grit and the wind whistling through the hollow bones of buildings. Clifford is my protector. He is a man built from gristle and silence, his face a road map of scars and sorrows. He carries a rifle that is older than I am, and his eyes are always moving, always watching the gray horizons. He does not speak much. His language is the pressure of his hand on my shoulder, meaning stop, or the slight tilt of his head, meaning listen. I am Erica. I am 12 years old, or perhaps I am 13. Time has become soft, losing its shape like a thing left out in the rain. I have a gift. That is what Clifford calls it, in his rare, gravel-voiced pronouncements. He never says what it is. He doesn't have to. I know. When I lay my hand on the scorched earth, I can feel a faint, thrumming warmth, like a dying ember in a hearth of ashes. It is the memory of life. I can feel the ghost of grass, the echo of roots, the whisper of a stream that ran here 1,000 years ago. And sometimes, if I concentrate until my head aches and my nose bleeds a thin trickle of rust red, I can pull that memory into the now. A single blade of sickly green grass might push up through the cracked asphalt. A drop of clean water might bead on a stone. It is not much. It is a flicker in an ocean of night. But to the few wanderers we encounter, it is a miracle. They are hollowed-out people, their eyes like burnt holes in a blanket. They huddle in the shelves of old supermarkets and subway tunnels, their skin gray, their spirits broken. When they see the small, trembling leaf, like coax from a dead seed, they do not cheer. They weep. It is a hope so painful it seems to wound them anew. Clifford allows these moments, but he is always tense, his hand never far from his rifle. Hope is a dangerous currency. It draws attention. The attention found us in a place that was once called a town. There was a sign, half buried in the dirt, that read, "Welcome to Rockhaven." It was not a haven. It was a collection of crumbling brick structures around a dry fountain. We found a small group there, maybe 10 souls, led by a woman named Anya, whose voice was as thin and brittle as dried leaves. I placed my hands on the dust in the center of the town square, and I pushed. I pushed with the memory of rain and the image of a dandelion my mother had once shown me in a book. A patch of tough gray-green moss spread from my fingertips, a small, defiant carpet in the vastness of the gray. A man stepped from the shadows of the old post office. He was not like the others. He did not shuffle. He did not have the stoop of starvation or the twitch of perpetual fear. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace, and his long coat, though stained, was whole. He was tall and gaunt, his face all sharp angles and pale skin, and his eyes were the flat, cold color of a winter sky. He was Grayson. He did not look at the moss. He looked at me. His gaze was a physical weight, a cold pressure on my skin. "Interesting," he said. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. "The stories are true, then. A little gardener for the wasteland." Clifford was in front of me in an instant, his body a shield. The air grew thick and heavy. "We are just passing through," Clifford said, his voice low and dangerous. "Course you are," Grayson replied, a smile playing on his thin lips. It was a smile that did not touch his eyes. "But the child, she is not just passing through, is she? She is a destination, a fixed point." He took a step closer, and I noticed the men with him. They were not ragged wanderers. They were like him, cold and focused, their eyes empty. They carried weapons that were not old or rusted, but sleek and dark and purpose-built. "The world is sick," Grayson continued, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper that somehow carried across the square. "It is fevered, dying, and you are trying to cool its brow with a damp cloth. It is a sweet, futile gesture. I, however, propose a different treatment. I believe in embracing the fever, in letting it burn away the weakness, until all that remains is a pure, clean strength." Well, he gestured to the gray world around us. "This is not the end. It is a purification, a blank slate. And you, little one, you all are an anomaly, a speck of the old world, refusing to be scrubbed away. You unbalance the equation." Clifford's rifle was in his hands. You will not touch her. None. Hussein. Grayson's smile widened, a crack in the porcelain of his face. I am not here to touch her. I am here to invite her. There is a place north of here, a place where the sickness has become a new kind of health, where the silence has been given a voice. We are building something there, something strong. She could be its heart. She is not for you, Clifford growled. Everything is for us, Grayson said, and the pleasantry fell from his voice, leaving only the cold, hard metal beneath. The old world is a ghost, and you are clinging to its shroud. Let go, or we will burn the shroud and you with it. He left then, melting back into the shadows with his men. The encounter was over as quickly as it had begun, but the silence he left behind was different. It was charged, pregnant with a new kind of threat. It was not the passive silence of death, but the active, waiting silence of a predator. We left Rockhaven that night, moving under the bruised purple sky. Anya and her people did not look at us as we went. They were already forgetting, retreating back into their shells. Hope was too heavy a burden to carry. The days blurred into a nightmare of forced marches. Clifford pushed us harder, his silence now a grim, focused thing. He avoided the open roads, leading us through collapsed train tunnels and the skeletal remains of forests, the trees like blackened bones against the sky. He was a man being hunted, and I was the prize. My gift felt smaller than ever, a foolish, flickering candle in a vast, hungry dark. Grayson was always there, just at the edge of our perception. We never saw him, but we saw his signs. A footprint in the ash that was too clean, too deep. The carcass of a mutated dog, not torn apart by other animals, but killed with a single precise cut. The world itself seemed to be cooperating with him. The wind would sometimes carry a sound that was almost like speech, a low, guttural whispering that seemed to come from the very stones. It spoke of an end to struggle, of the peace that could be found in surrender. It was a voice that promised to make the gray, static world make sense. One night, huddled in the concrete husk of a drainage pipe, Clifford broke his silence. The rain was falling outside, a toxic, acidic drizzle that sizzled on the metal ruins. "He's not a man, Erica," Clifford said, his voice a raw whisper. He was cleaning his rifle, the motion slow and deliberate. "Not anymore. He is a vessel, a catastrophe. It didn't just break the world. It cracked it open. It let things in. Or maybe it let something out. Something that was always here, sleeping underneath. He is a priest for the emptiness. He believes that by erasing the last remnants of what we were, he can become a part of something." "What does it want with me?" I asked, my voice small. "Your light," he said simply. "A fire needs fuel. A void needs to consume. Your gift, the life in you, it is the one thing that truly opposes them. So they will either extinguish it, or they will devour it and use its power to blacken the last few stars in the sky." I began to have dreams. Or perhaps they were not dreams, but transmissions. I would close my eyes and see a vast, geometric city of black, non-Euclidean stone, rising from a plain of ash. There were no right angles. The towers spiraled in ways that hurt my mind to look at, and things moved in the shadows between them. Things with too many limbs or not enough. And in the center of it all was a pulsing, dark light. It was not an absence of light, but its opposite, a light that sucked all other light into it. It was the embodiment of the silence, the cold, the end of things. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled the marrow in my bones, that Grayson was there, kneeling before it, offering it my name. "We were getting closer to the coast," Clifford said. The air began to carry a new smell, the salt of a dead sea. The land flattened out, covered in a fine white ash that was like walking on bone meal. And then we saw it. On the horizon, a stain, a darkness that was more than just the coming night. It was a place where the sky itself seemed to be bruised black, a permanent storm circling something on the ground. The whispering on the wind became a constant, droning hum. It was the sound of a beehive in a corpse. This was Grayson's destination, the source, the place where the world's sickness had become a new kind of health. Clifford stopped at the crest of a final hill. Below us, the land fell away into a massive crater-like basin, and in the center of that basin stood the city from my dreams. It was real. The black stone, the impossible angles, the sense of profound, ancient wrongness. It was a cancer growing on the face of the planet. The dark light pulsed at its heart, a slow, rhythmic beat, like a sleeping god's heart. "We cannot go around," Clifford said, his face grim. "He has herded us here." From the shadows at the base of the hill, figures emerged. Dozens of them. They were the wanderers we had met, the survivors from Rockhaven and other pockets of resistance. But they were changed. Their eyes were now the same flat, cold color as Grayson's. They moved in unison, a single, shambling organism. They had surrendered. They had embraced the fever. And standing before them was Grayson. He spread his arms wide as if to welcome us home. "The pilgrimage is over," he called out, his voice amplified by the strange acoustics of the place, echoing not just in the air, but inside my skull. "You have brought the offering. Now witness the culmination." The converted survivors began to chant, a low, monotonous sound that was not made of words, but of pure intent. It was a song of unbeing. The dark light in the center of the city pulsed brighter, faster. I felt a pulling sensation, a terrible suction not on my body, but on my soul, on my gift. It was trying to draw the life out of me, to feed the hungry heart of the void. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The memories I held so dear, the smell of rain, the color of a rose, the feel of my mother's hand, they began to fray at the edges, turning gray and indistinct. Clifford roared, a raw animal sound of defiance. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot was impossibly loud, a crack of reality in that place of nightmares. One of the chanting figures fell. The chant faltered for a second. It was enough. Grayson's head snapped towards Clifford. The pleasant mask was gone, replaced by a rage as cold and infinite as space. "You interrupt the liturgy." Clifford fired again and again, a lone soldier holding the line against the end of the world. He was buying me time. With each shot, the pulling sensation weakened slightly. He was a distraction, a pinprick of pain to the vast, consuming entity. "Run, Erica!" he shouted, his voice already strained. "To the sea." But I couldn't run. I was rooted to the spot, the battle happening inside me as much as outside. The void pulled at the life in me, and I pulled back. I reached down, my hands sinking into the dead white ash, and I pushed. I pushed not with the memory of a single blade of grass, but with the memory of an entire world. I pushed with the roar of dinosaurs and the whisper of the first single-celled creature in a primeval ocean. I pushed with the joy of a child running through a field and the sorrow of a billion funerals. I pushed with everything that was, and is, and could be. The ground trembled. A spider web of green shot out from my hands, not the sickly green of my previous efforts, but a vibrant, blinding emerald green. It was a ghost, a memory made manifest for a single glorious second. A phantom forest erupted from the ash, towering oaks and mighty redwoods, their leaves rustling in a wind that did not exist. Flowers of every color bloomed and withered in the space of a heartbeat. The air sang with the ghosts of birds. It was alive. A beautiful, desperate lie. But it was a lie built from the absolute truth of what had been. The dark light in the city shrieked. It was a sound that had no physical component. A silent scream of pure rage that tore directly at the mind. The converted survivors recoiled, clutching their heads. My phantom world flickered, its colors already leaching away, unable to sustain itself against the crushing reality of the void. Grayson took a step towards me, his face a mask of fury and something else. A profound, cosmic hunger. Clifford was there. He had used my distraction to close the distance. He did not have his rifle anymore. He held a long, sharpened piece of rebar, scavenged from the ruins. He drove it into Grayson's chest. There was no scream of pain. Grayson looked down at the metal protruding from his body, and then back at Clifford. He smiled, a thin trickle of black fluid leaking from the corner of his mouth. "The body is a shell," he whispered. "You have broken a cup. The wine is already spilled." He placed his hand on Clifford's face. Clifford did not cry out. He simply stiffened. His eyes, those weary, watchful eyes, went wide with a terror I cannot describe. And then they went blank. The color drained from his skin, from his hair, from his clothes, until he was a statue of fine, gray ash. He stood for a moment, a monument to his own end, and then he crumbled, collapsing into a small, neat pile of dust at Grayson's feet. The gesture was gone. The loop was broken. I did not scream. I did not cry. A profound stillness settled over me. The phantom forest was gone. The chanting had stopped. The converted survivors were on their knees, moaning. The stolen light in their eyes extinguished. My gift was spent. I was hollow, a dry well. Grayson pulled the rebar from his chest and dropped it with a clatter. The wound did not bleed. It was just a hole. He looked at me, and the hunger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a kind of weary satisfaction. "You see," he said, his voice soft now, almost gentle. "The struggle is the pain. Letting go is the peace." He turned and walked back towards the Black City, his followers stumbling after him. They were returning to their god, their void. They had won. I was alone. I walked. I do not know for how long. I walked away from the city, towards the smell of the Dead Sea. I came to a cliff overlooking an ocean that was not blue, but a stagnant, leaden gray. The water did not move. It was a solid sheet of nothing. The sky and the sea were the same color, blending into a single, featureless gray void. I sat on the edge of the cliff, my legs dangling over the abyss. There was nothing left in me. No life to give, no memories strong enough to hold back the gray. Clifford's face was already becoming soft in my mind, the details blurring. The taste of a strawberry was a story I had once been told. The color green was a concept I could no longer grasp. The world was quiet, truly quiet. The whispering had stopped. The battle was over. I looked out at the Dead Sea and the dead sky, and I felt the vast, comfortable emptiness calling to me. It was not a malevolent call. It was an invitation to rest, to stop fighting, to stop remembering, to become a part of the great, gray, silent whole. The edges of my vision began to soften, to blur. The line between the sea and the sky dissolved. The weight of my body seemed to lessen. The memory of Clifford's hand on my cheek was the last to go, a phantom pressure that faded like a sigh. And then there was only the gray, not as a color, but as a state of being. A perfect, uniform, endless gray. And then there was nothing at all. The nothing was not empty. It was full. It was a substance, thick and patient and complete. It had no temperature, no scent, no sound. It was the end of sensation. I was not Erica. I was a point of awareness dissolving into a solution of absolute neutrality. There was no pain. There was no fear. There was only the profound relief of cessation. The void was not a monster. It was a lullaby. A single word echoed in the formless quiet. Not a sound, but the ghost of a concept. A name. Why, Clifford Dunn. It was not a memory. It was a splinter. A tiny, sharp, impossible splinter in the smooth skin of nothingness. With the name came a feeling, a physical memory so acute it was an agony. The weight of his hand on my shoulder, the rough texture of his coat against my cheek, the low rumble of his voice telling me to be brave. The gray resisted. It pressed in, a soft, smothering pillow trying to absorb the splinter, to smooth it away. It offered peace. It promised an end to the hurt. But the splinter held, and around it, other splinters began to form. The taste of a wild blackberry, so tart it made my jaw ache. The crushing weight of the book of plants in my lap. The dizzying scent of pine resin on a hot day. The crushing grief of my mother's still form. The terrifying, wonderful tremor of life, answering my call in the dead soil of Rockhaven. Each memory was a shard of glass in the soothing gray. Each one was a wound. Each one was an anchor. I was Erica. The gray was a lie. A beautiful, seductive, comfortable lie. It was the peace of the grave. Grayson was right. Letting go was the end of struggle. But struggle was life. I did not have my gift anymore. I could feel the emptiness where it had been, a dry river in my soul. But I had this, the splinters, the shattered, painful, beautiful pieces of what I had been, of what the world had been. I focused on the splinters. I did not try to push them out to create life. I simply held them. I honored them. And I let their sharp edges cut me, reminding me that I could feel. The gray receded, not with a roar, but with a soft, sighing withdrawal, like a tide going out. I was sitting on the cliff. The Dead Sea was below me. The Black City was at my back. I was still hollow, still spent, but I was present. A movement caught my eye. Down on the bleak shore where the gray ash met the stagnant water, something was happening. A figure was moving. It was one of the converted, a man from Rockhaven. He was on his hands and knees. He was not chanting. He was trembling. He was clawing at the ash. His movements frantic, desperate. He had been connected to the void. He had felt its promise of peace. And now, with Grayson's focus elsewhere, with the grand liturgy interrupted by Clifford's sacrifice and my final failed stand, the connection had frayed. The peace was evaporating, and what was left was the raw, agonizing truth of his existence. The memory of his hunger, his loss, his fear, was flooding back in. It was a torment worse than any the wasteland had offered. He was weeping, great, ragged sobs that shook his entire body. He was remembering, and it was destroying him. I stood up. My legs were weak. I had no plan. I had no power. I was just a girl on a cliff overlooking the end of everything. But I had the splinters. I walked down the gentle, ashy slope to the shore. The man did not look up as I approached. He was lost in his private hell. I knelt in the ash beside him, the dead water lapping sluggishly at my boots. I did not touch him. I did not speak. I closed my eyes. And I did the only thing I had left. I remembered. I did not push the memory out. I simply held it in my mind, clear and sharp. I remembered the phantom forest I had created, not as a lie, but as a testament. I remembered the specific, vibrant green of a maple leaf in the fall, the crispness of the air, the sound of my own laughter echoing between the trees. I held the memory until it felt solid inside me, a small, hard, precious stone of what was real. The man's sobbing slowed. He lifted his head. His eyes were still the flat, cold gray. But there was a crack in them now, a flicker of confused pain. He was looking at me, but he was not seeing me. He was seeing the reflection of my memory. It was not a gift. It was a sharing, a confession. I am Erica. I remember green. I remember love. I remember loss. This is what I am. This is what we were. He stared for a long time. Then, slowly, he lowered his head again, but he did not go back to clawing at the ground. He was still. He was listening. I looked up from the man and out across the barren shore. Other figures were stirring, dozens of them. They were emerging from their stupor, the void's hold on them weakening. They were not being saved. They were waking up, and the waking was a nightmare. I had no garden to give them, no clean water, no promises of a better tomorrow. All I had was a handful of splinters, a collection of broken, beautiful truths. I stood up, my knees cracking in the silence. The work was not to rebuild the world. That was beyond me. The work was to remember it, to be a keeper of the splinters so that the great gray lie would never be the only truth. I turned my back on the Dead Sea and began to walk, not away from the Black City, but parallel to it, along the shore. The man on the ground did not follow me, but when I glanced back, I saw he had risen to his feet. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at his own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. He was remembering too. The ash made no sound under my feet. It was like walking on the moon of a dead world. The others, the ones waking up, did not speak. They simply fell into step around me, a ragged, silent procession of the newly bereaved. We were a funeral march for a planet. There were no leaders here, no guides. I was just the first one to start walking. We found a place where the cliff face had sheared away, creating a shallow overhang. It was not a shelter, not really, but it was a defined space, a break in the endless, flat, gray. We huddled there, maybe 30 of us, as the light, or the dull imitation of it, began to fade from the bruised sky. The air grew colder, a deep, penetrating chill that had nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with proximity to the void. No one had tried to light a fire. There was nothing to burn. And the concept of warmth felt like a forgotten heresy. We sat in the growing dark, and the only sounds were the ragged breaths of people remembering how to hurt. A woman near me began to rock back and forth, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She was humming a tuneless, broken little melody, a lullaby. The sound was more devastating than any scream. It was a memory fighting its way out of a ruined throat. I closed my eyes and reached for my own splinters. I focused on the feeling of warmth, not the memory of a fire, but the physical sensation of it. The way it feels on your skin after coming in from a bitter cold. The way it seeps into your bones. I held the sensation in my mind, cradling it, polishing it like a stone. I did not know if it would work. This was not the gift. This was something else, something more fragile. A shared delusion, perhaps. A collective willing of a ghost. I began to speak. My voice was a dry rustle, unfamiliar to my own ears. I remember the sun, I whispered. It was not a story. It was a statement of fact. Not the pale, sick thing we see now. The real sun. It was yellow. It felt like a weight on your skin. It could make you sweat. If you closed your eyes and faced it, you could see red through your eyelids. No one responded. The woman kept rocking. The man from the shore stared into the nothing. I tried again. I remember the smell of bread. Real bread baked from wheat. It was a rich, yeasty smell. It filled the whole house. The crust was hard and crackled when you broke it. The inside was soft and warm. It steamed in the cold air. A man across the cave let out a choked sound, half sob, half laugh. My wife, he stammered. She burned it. Every time. The bottom was always black. It was the first real sentence any of them had spoken. It hung in the cold air, a precious, broken thing. Yes, I said. Burned bread. I remember that too. Another voice, a younger one, piped up from the shadows. What about rain? Real rain. It was cold, I said, a faint, real smile touching my lips for the first time in an eternity. And it made you wet. Your clothes would stick to you. Your hair would get flat. And afterwards, if the sun came out, everything would smell clean. And you could see worms on the pavement. One by one, they began to speak. They did not speak of grand things, of heroes or lost cities. They spoke of the small, stupid, mundane details that had made up a life. The frustration of a knot in a shoelace. The particular sound of a car door slamming. The way a cat would curl up in a patch of sun on the floor. The taste of a specific brand of soda. The ache in your legs after a long walk. We were building a cathedral out of ghosts. A vast, invisible monument to a world that was no more. With every shared memory, the crushing weight of the gray outside our shallow cave felt a little less absolute. We were not creating life. We were defining a border. This is us. This is what we remember. The void is there. We are here. As the deepest dark of the night set in, the droning hum from the Black City changed. It grew louder, more focused. It was a sound of agitation, of notice. They knew we were here. We were a flicker of static on the edge of their perfect silence. A few memories, huddled under a rock, refusing to be smoothed away. Grayson would come for us. The peace he offered was a lie, and lies cannot tolerate a single stubborn truth. I looked at the faces around me, lit only by the faint, sickly glow of the city in the distance. They were not warriors. They were refugees from reality. But they were holding their splinters. They were remembering. The battle was not over. It had just changed. It was no longer a fight for the future. It was a fight for the past. And if we could hold on to the past, then the present, no matter how bleak, would remain ours. The hum was a physical pressure now, a vibration that made the ash on the ground tremble and our teeth ache. It was searching. The woman who had been humming the lullaby fell silent, her hands clutching at her ears. The fragile community of memory we had built was cracking under the assault. They're coming. The man from the shore whispered, his voice thick with a terror I knew too well. It was the fear of being unmade, of having your splinters sanded down into nothing. I looked at their faces, pale and terrified in the gloom. We could run. We could scatter into the wasteland and delay the inevitable. But running was just another form of forgetting. It is an admission that the void owned the ground beneath our feet. No, I said, and my voice was stronger than I felt. We stay. I stood up and walked to the mouth of the overhang, facing the direction of the city. The others watched me, a mixture of hope and despair in their eyes. I had no grand power to summon. I was just a girl, but I was their rememberer. I closed my eyes, not to block out the hum, but to focus past it. I reached for the sharpest splinter I had, the one that had pulled me back from the gray. Clifford's hand on my shoulder. The absolute, solid reality of that touch. The trust in it. The love in it. I held it until it was more real than the cold air. More real than the droning hum. I began to speak his story. I did not shout. I simply laid the words down like stones, building a wall against the noise. His name was Clifford, I said. He had a scar above his left eyebrow from a piece of flying shrapnel. He hated cooked carrots. He could field strip his rifle in the dark. He once carried a wounded dog for 20 miles because it looked at him with trusting eyes. The hum intensified, a wave of dissonance meant to shatter my words. But behind me, a voice joined mine. It was the man who remembered his wife's burnt bread. His name was Carl, he said, his voice trembling but clear. He fixed clocks. He had fingers that were always stained with grease. Then the young one. My sister's name was Lissa. She could whistle through a blade of grass. She was afraid of moths. One by one they stood. They did not come to the front. They simply stood where they were, in the dark, under the rock. And they spoke. They offered up their splinters, their precious, painful truths. We were not shouting defiance. We were simply stating facts. We were building a cairn of memories, a testament that stood in quiet opposition to the void's great, gray negation. The humming did not stop, but it changed again. The aggression bled away, replaced by a kind of confusion. It was a sound that had never encountered this particular frequency of resistance. It knew how to consume life, how to offer peace in exchange for surrender. It did not know how to process this. A group of people with nothing left to lose, offering it their pain as a shield. A figure emerged from the gloom, walking slowly towards our cave. It was not Grayson. It was one of the converted, a woman I vaguely recognized from the outskirts of Rockhaven. Her gray eyes were fixed on us, but they were not blank. They were puzzled. She stopped a dozen paces away, her head tilted as if listening to a faint, strange music. She did not speak. She did not attack. She just stood there, listening to the chorus of our memories. The hum from the city seemed to be coming from her, from a place deep in her chest. Then she took a single, shuddering breath. It was the first unsynchronized breath I had seen one of them take. Her mouth opened, and a word fell out, rusty and broken. Daffodils. The word hung in the air, a fragile, yellow thing. It was not a memory she had been ordered to recall. It was a leak, a crack. The humming from the city stuttered. The woman looked down at her own hands, a flicker of something like panic in her flat eyes. She had broken the liturgy. She had introduced a variable. I took a step forward, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I did not reach out to her. I simply answered. Yes, I said, my voice soft but clear. Daffodils. They were yellow. They came up through the snow sometimes. Their stems were green and hollow. She flinched as if I had struck her. The gray in her eyes swirled, a storm of conflicting commands. The void wanted to smooth this over, to reabsorb this errant thought. But the thought had a root. It had a color. My garden, she whispered, each word a struggle, pulled from a great depth. The bulbs. I planted them. Behind me, the recitation of names and details had stopped. Everyone was watching, holding their breath. We were witnessing a miracle more profound than any act of creation. The unmaking of a conversion. The woman's knees buckled. She did not fall, but sank slowly to the ash, her hands pressed to the sides of her head. A low moan escaped her, a sound of pure, undiluted agony. The peace was tearing, and the world was rushing back in. A torrent of sensation and memory she had been spared for who knows how long. It was a brutal, painful rebirth. The hum from the city became a shriek of pure rage. It was no longer confused. It was threatened. Other figures were emerging from the darkness now. Dozens of them. Their movements stiff and synchronized. They were not puzzled. They were coming to silence the infection, to quarantine the memory, The man from the shore, Carl, moved to my side. "They're coming for her. For us." I looked from the weeping woman on the ground to the advancing line of gray-eyed converts. We had no weapons. We had no strength. But we had a new tactic. A new kind of weapon. "Don't fight them," I said, my voice low and urgent. Remember at them. As the first of the converted reached us, a man with a blank face and reaching hands, I didn't push him away. I looked into his empty eyes and I spoke. "The feeling of mud between your toes, cold, slick mud from the riverbank." He hesitated, his hand an inch from my arm. To my left, a woman was facing down another convert. "The sound of bacon frying in a pan," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "The way it pops and spits." The advancing line faltered. Their synchronized movement broke as individual minds, buried deep, snagged on these hooks of sensory memory. A man stopped, his head twitching. A woman blinked rapidly, her mouth working soundlessly. We were not attacking their bodies. We were besieging their silence. We were offering them back their pain, and in doing so, offering them back themselves. The shrieking hum from the city reached a fever pitch. And then, from within the heart of that noise, a new figure strode forth. It was Grayson. His form was limned in a sickly gray light, and his face was a mask of cold, focused fury. The comfortable lies were gone. This was the real face of the void, intolerant of any truth but its own. He ignored the rest of us, his gaze fixed on me. "You," he said. And the word was like the closing of a tomb door. "You are a flaw, a scar. I will erase you myself." He raised a hand, and the gray substance of the void itself seemed to gather around it. A vortex of absolute negation. It was not meant to kill. It was meant to unwrite. I could feel it pulling at the edges of my being, trying to pluck the splinters from my soul. I had nothing left to counter it. My memories felt small and brittle against such focused power. I was just a girl, standing in the ash. But I was not alone. A sound started behind me. It was the woman who had hummed a lullaby. She was humming it again, but louder now. The melody, a thin, brave wire against the crushing silence. Then Carl began to speak again of his wife's burnt bread. The young one shouted his sister's name. "Lisa!" One by one, then all together, they raised their voices. They did not shout their memories at Grayson. They turned their backs to him. They faced the advancing converts, and they offered their stories, not as weapons, but as gifts. They built a wall of memory around me, a fortress of what was real. Grayson's void energy struck that wall. It did not shatter it. The memories absorbed a blow. The negation met 1,000 points of defiant affirmation, and could not cancel them all out. The energy dissipated with a sound like a sigh of frustration. Grayson stared, his fury giving way to something I had never seen in him before. A flicker of doubt. He had the power to erase a world, but he did not have the power to erase the fact that it had been. He took a step back. In that moment of his uncertainty, the woman on the ground, the one who had remembered daffodils, lifted her head. Her eyes were no longer gray. They were full of a terrible, clear, and painful light. She looked at Grayson, the man who had offered her peace, and she spoke a single devastating sentence. "I remember the sun," she said, "and you have stolen it." It was the truth, plain and simple, and it was a truth he could not bear. With a roar that was not entirely human, Grayson turned and retreated into the darkness, the shrieking hum of the city dying down to a sullen, wounded thrum. The converted who had been advancing now stood motionless, like puppets with their strings cut, the aggressive command withdrawn. The immediate threat was over. For now. We were left in the ringing silence, surrounded by the dormant converts and the aching reality of our own survival. I looked at the faces of my fellow rememberers. We were exhausted, hollowed out, but we were here. We were present. The woman who had remembered the daffodils slowly, painfully, got to her feet. She did not look at any of us. She walked to the edge of our group and looked out towards the Dead Sea, her arms wrapped around herself, holding in the storm of her returned life. The work was not over. It had only just begun. We were a library of the lost world, and our only task was to stay open. We did not sleep. We kept watch in shifts, though what we were watching for, none of us could say. The gray figures did not move, but stood like statues in the ash, their internal war silent for the moment. The woman by the shore did not move either. She was a sentinel for her own grief. As the false dawn lightened the sky from black to a deeper gray, I walked among the motionless converts. Up close, their faces were not identical. The void had not erased their features, only the animation behind them. They were like portraits painted by a master who had forgotten how to capture a soul. I stopped before a man with a strong jaw and lines around his eyes that spoke of a life of laughter. I wondered what memory would be the key. I leaned close, my voice barely a whisper. "The smell of cut grass," I said. "The way it sticks to your shoes and stains them green." Nothing, not a flicker. A hand touched my elbow. It was Carl. His face was grim. "It's not a code," he said softly. "You can't just guess the right words. It has to be their memory. Their splinter." He was right. We were not hackers breaking a cipher. We were archivists trying to read a blank scroll. We had no way of knowing what was written underneath. We gathered back under the overhang, a council of the newly awakened. The woman from the shore had finally joined us, drawn by the low murmur of our voices. She said her name was Alara. She did not offer more, and no one asked. "We can't stay here," the young one, Finn, said. "They'll come back. Grayson will come back with more." "Where would we go?" asked another. "There is nowhere." I looked out at the dormant converts. 30 of us, standing against a city of thousands. We had won a skirmish with a new kind of weapon, but we were hopelessly outnumbered. Our ammunition was finite, drawn from a well of pain that was, for all of us, running deep. "We don't run from them," I said, the idea forming as I spoke the words. "We walk through them." A few looked at me as if I were mad. Alara, however, nodded slowly, her eyes on the silent figures. "We remind them," she said. "One by one. We don't know the right words, so we just talk. We pour the memories out. We see what sticks." It was a desperate, foolish plan. It was our only plan. And so, as the dull day solidified around us, we left the safety of the overhang. We did not walk away from the Black City. We walked toward its silent outposts. We split into pairs for courage, and we approached the gray figures. I stood with Carl before the man with the laugh lines. Carl cleared his throat, nervous. "My wife," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "She couldn't sing, not a single note. But she sang anyway, in the kitchen, when she thought no one was listening. It was awful. It was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard." The man did not move. I tried. I remember the weight of a book in my hands, the sound of the page turning, the smell of old paper and glue. Nothing. We moved to the next one, a woman with her hair tied back in a simple, grayed-out bun. We offered her the taste of strawberries, the chill of ice, the exhaustion after a long day's work. Nothing. 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 All around me, the other pairs were having the same lack of success. Our words were falling on them like ash, coating them but not penetrating. Despair began to creep back in, cold and familiar. Then a cry went up from Finn. He was standing with Ilara before a young convert, a boy who couldn't have been much older than him. Finn was crying, his words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate stream. And the way the controller would vibrate in your hands when you crashed the car. And the cheat codes for infinite lives, you'd write them on the back of your hand in pen. You remember. You have to remember. The boy's hand twitched. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible jerk of the fingers. It was enough. A wave of energy, silent but palpable, went through our small group. It was a spark. A single, solitary spark in an ocean of gray. It was not a victory. It was a possibility. We redoubled our efforts, our voices rising in a chaotic, hopeful chorus of lost things. We were no longer an army. We were a garden of ghosts, planting seeds in barren soil, praying for just one to take root.